Now for our story. The train bearing Lisa Fenner and Paul Cromwell sped through the smooth snowfields of the Middle West. In a few hours, they would be in Chicago. Lisa was the young woman with whom Kit Meade had shared a house at Malibu Beach during her stay in California. The woman who, because of a mistaken sense of guilt for the accident which had caused Kit the loss of her own child, a sense of guilt which Kit had deliberately fostered, had finally brought herself to overcome her deep maternal feelings and to relinquish her own baby son to Kit. Kit had told Lisa that if she could take the child, she would return to Wakefield, restore her marriage to Bill Meade, completely withdraw from Paul Cromwell's life. And Lisa loved Paul Cromwell. Sitting in the club car, reviewing the events of the last month.
Max?
Yes, sir. Here's the paper, sir.
Good. Let's have a look at it.
Mr. Cromwell,
Yes, Max?
I took the liberty of glancing at the news as I came through the train.
Oh, naturally.
I saw an item, it was in the article section, which might be of interest to you.
Oh, really, Max? Oh, not Susanna Blythe. Good Lord, don't tell me she's in Chicago.
Oh, no, sir. I think, in a way, this may strike you as good news. The item to which I referred is here, sir.
Let's see. The Fred Astaire of the Niteries clicks solidly in his recent opening at the Cobra Room. Lance Fenner, whose intricate patterns and subtle timing had the... Lance. So Lisa's husband will be. Huh. Well, I foresee an eventful stay in Chicago.
You're not worried, are you, Mr. Cromwell?
Worried? Far from it. I only wish... Oh, no, but that's impossible.
Impossible, Mr. Cromwell? Isn't it said that nothing is impossible?
Well, perhaps. But I'm afraid my wish was a bit more than I could ever expect.
What did you have in mind, sir? One never knows.
I was thinking that I would like to see Lisa and Lance fall into each other's arms with loud cries of joy and have a nice lovers' reunion.
It does seem unlikely. But strange things happen in a woman's heart.
Strange is hardly the word, Max. You might even say weird. And I confess I've been at my wit's end lately.
Mrs. Fenner is a very emotional young woman.
Emotional? Lisa makes Scarlett O'Hara seem cold and unfeeling by comparison. You never know what she's going to do or say next.
Well, Mr. Cromwell, if you'll forgive me, it was my opinion from the beginning that you were being rather unwise.
Oh, I know, Max. I should have listened to you. But you see, the whole situation was so complicated. Lisa suddenly arriving in Malibu from San Francisco, all in a dither about Lance's walking out on her, and then Kit's blowing in from Wakefield. I couldn't let Lisa down. She was in a bad spot.
And now, Mr. Cromwell, you're in one yourself, it seems to me.
Yes, I suppose I am. It is at the moment. But once we get everything straightened out about the baby, we get that settled legally, well, then Kit and I can begin to live our own lives.
And Mrs. Fenner?
Something may happen. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, Max.
But I'm afraid, Mr. Cromwell, that the problem cannot be dismissed so lightly. Mrs. Fenner is, as you say, somewhat unpredictable. If it were Mrs. Meade now, the whole question would have a different aspect.
Kit. Yes, Max, if it were a Kit we had to contend with now, things would be very different. In fact, there'd be no problem.
Mrs. Meade is so sophisticated, so sure of herself.
Yes. Yes, indeed she is.
Have you heard from Mrs. Meade lately?
No. I had just a couple of very brief notes. Kit's not much of a correspondent. Never has been. But I imagine if there were any startling developments in Wakefield, she would have written. I can depend on her.
I hope so.
What's the matter, Max? Out with it.
It's just, Mr. Cromwell, that I've been a bit worried.
Worried, Max?
Yes. Disturbed, you might say. I'd like to take the liberty of suggesting that you exercise great care in your dealings with Mrs. Fenner. Don't expect too much. Or rather, expect the worst.
The worst?
I believe you should keep a careful eye on her.
Well, how can I keep a careful eye on her? Do you expect she's going to disappear on a very respectable train?
I'm not concerned about what happens on the train, Mr. Cromwell. But after we get to Chicago...
Yes, Max. Then what?
Chicago is only a short distance from Wakefield. If Mrs. Fenner were to take it into her head to go down to Wakefield, it might be very awkward. That's why I feel you're on dangerous ground.
Dangerous ground?
Lisa.
Who's on dangerous ground?
Never mind, Lisa. I'm going to let you die of curiosity as a punishment for coming into a gentleman's drawing room without knocking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. You're perfectly right. Forgive me. I didn't think. I suppose it's a carryover from my theater days, when Lance and I used to travel from town to town with our act. Nobody pays much attention to things like that on sleeper jumps, as we call them.
And, speaking of Lance, you haven't heard from him lately, I suppose?
Why, no. What makes you ask that?
Oh, just that I...
What, Paul?
Oh, nothing, Lisa, nothing.
Are you all packed, Mrs. Fenner?
Well, yes, I am, Max.
Good. Then I think I'll go and see to the luggage. We're due to arrive in Chicago in about an hour. Will you excuse me, sir?
All right, Max.
Paul,
Yes, Lisa?
what were you and Max talking about when I came in?
Talking about? Well, let me see. Politics, I believe. Why?
I just had an idea you were talking about me. You both look so self-conscious.
Oh, nonsense, Lisa. Honestly, you're so super sensitive. So engrossed in yourself. You imagine the silliest things. And even assuming that we had been talking about you, there'd be no harm in it. Max is fond of you, and he's a bit worried about you. And so am I.
But why, Paul?
Well, good heaven, Lisa. Look at yourself in the mirror this minute. You're obviously about to burst into tears. Floods of them. And it's practically a daily occurrence. Now, why wouldn't I be worried?
I'm sorry, Paul.
Lisa, it's doing no harm to me. It's doing you the harm. But I do wish you'd try to get a hold of yourself. It's very, very trying.
I know, Paul. I tell myself I must pull myself together, not make scenes. I know how men hate a woman to be always in tears. I want so much to be a gay, cheerful companion for you.
And it would be a pleasant change to see you smiling.
I've tried so hard. But I keep thinking. Everything looks so hopeless.
Well, why do you say that, Lisa? We're doing exactly what we planned to do. Your divorce. Getting the baby legally turned over to Kit. Now, when we can...
The baby.
Oh, Lisa. What on earth is the matter with you?
It's the baby I keep thinking about. I never should have done it. I never should have let Kit take the baby.
But, Lisa, we've been all through that. You knew what you were doing.
Maybe I thought I did. But I was wrong. I shouldn't have given the baby up, no matter what the reasons were.
Well, it's done now, Lisa. It's too late. You'll have to pull yourself together. Forget all about it.
But I can't forget. I'll never be able to. The baby is mine. I want him back, Paul.
What?
That's the way I feel, Paul. I can't help it. I want him back.
Paul Cromwell stared at the sobbing girl's bent head in horror. For Lisa's last words had come with the shock of something he dreaded, and yet had hoped against hope could be forestalled. If Lisa really meant what she'd said, if she attempted to reclaim her baby son, all Paul's plans with Kit Meade would be ruined. Now for our story. In the cozy living room of Aunt Mary Lane's farmhouse, a roaring fire leapt up the chimney. Lefty Larkin was sitting in his favorite easy chair, while Aunt Mary worked placidly on the patchwork quilt that had once been intended as a wedding present for her niece, Peggy Douglas. But the wedding had been postponed, and Aunt Mary had her own ideas as to how long the postponement would last. Peggy had complained of a headache earlier this evening, had gone up to her room to lie down. For a while, there was silence in the room, except for the brisk crackling of the fire. Then Lefty turned to Aunt Mary, watched her moodily for a moment as she made her precise, neat stitches. At last he sighed. A long, heartfelt sigh which caused Aunt Mary to look up at him in concern.
Why, Lefty, what's the matter? You sound like a small boy who's just found out there's no Santa Claus.
I was just thinking. There's no need for you to rush ahead with that quilt. No telling now when there'll be any need for its being finished.
Well, you never know. But you know how I am. Once I get a thing started, I like to keep on going until it's completed.
Yeah. Well, I only wish...
What, Lefty? What's bothering you tonight?
Oh, everything's so up in the air, with Nicholas wanting to postpone the wedding.
Well, you know how I feel about that. I think it's very wise.
I know, and I sure wish I agreed with you. But I was so glad to think that Peggy's life was going to be settled, that she'd be married to a nice young man, starting out in life for herself.
But, Lefty, just getting married is never the answer. It has to be the right person.
Sure, but for my money, Nicholas Dorn is the right person.
Well, apparently Nicholas himself isn't so sure about that.
It's the same old story. Every time things start to look up where Peggy's concerned, every time her life begins to take on some sort of shape, that Calvert gang upsets the apple cart.
But, Lefty, they...
I know. They didn't do it directly this time. But you know darn well, Aunt Mary, that Nicholas Dorn would have gone ahead with the wedding plans, except that he got this idea in his head that Peggy's still in love with Bill Meade.
Perhaps she is.
Well, Peggy ought to know whether she is or not. She's never said anything to me. There's something funny about that Calvert thing, too. I don't understand.
Oh, now what? You are in a mood tonight, aren't you?
Yes, I am. For one thing, I can't see why there hasn't been something in the paper about this divorce Bill and Meade and Kit are supposed to get. There must be some reason why they're stalling around.
Oh, well, I can tell you something about that.
You can? Oh, what is it?
I had a talk with Bill the other day. Ran into him on the Kenmore Hill Road, just as I was leaving the Stones.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what'd he say?
Well, it's rather odd. I confess I don't understand it myself. But it seems Ben Calvert made Bill a proposition, you might say.
Ben did?
Yes. It's very strange. Not like Ben at all.
Why?
Ben is not a man to suggest a compromise unless...
Well, what's the deal? What's Ben up to?
Well, it's sort of hard to believe. But the fact is that Ben offered Bill a divorce. That is, he said that Kit would go away somewhere and get a divorce quietly.
Well, that's just what Bill wants, isn't it? I suppose he snapped at the chance.
No, wait. That's not the end of it. There's a catch. Ben said Kit would give Bill the divorce on the condition that Bill would relinquish all claim to the baby, to his son.
Oh? Is that all? Well, looks like Bill would take Ben up on an offer like that. He doesn't want to be nursemaid to a baby a few months old if he really wants to be free from Kit.
But, Lefty, the baby is Bill's son. He loves him. He wants to bring the child up himself.
Well, that's about like Bill Meade. A man all alone with a kid. Why, he'd never win out in a million years if he tried to fight it out in court. He's surely smart enough to know that.
I think Bill realizes that it won't be easy. Yes, you may be right. But this case is somewhat out of the ordinary. You never can tell what a judge would decide, taking everything into consideration.
Well, I'll bet it'll never come to that. No. Bill Meade will jump at a chance to get his freedom, I'm afraid.
Why do you say you're afraid, Lefty? You mean because...
Well, Aunt Mary, with Nicholas postponing the wedding, I'm afraid because I just don't like the idea of Bill Meade being around loose. He's been enough of a headache married to Kit. But having him free and unattached, anything can happen.
Well, Lefty, after all, it's something that's entirely out of our control.
That's just the trouble. Out of control. Ever since that boy came into Peggy's life, I felt, well, as if we were all tearing along in a car without brakes, heading for a smash. Now I'm afraid it's just about due.
At that moment, the young man upon whom Lefty Larkin's gloomy thoughts were centered, the young man Lefty distrusted as the person who'd make Peggy Douglas so unhappy, was standing innocently in the rear of the Wakefield Public Library, looking anything but the threatening character Lefty pictured him. As Bill Meade reaches up to take a book from a shelf, Lefty looks up and A young girl, intently studying titles as she moves along, backs into him.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, that's a... What, Jane Plummer?
Bill, what are you doing here?
Why, don't you think I ever read books?
Oh, well, I come here so often, and I just never seen you here before.
Well, I'm doing a little research for my job.
Quiet, please.
Dear, I forgot.
Yeah, talking in the library is a cardinal sin.
How is your job, Bill?
Oh, going along all right, I guess.
What? I didn't hear you.
I said going along all right.
Oh, good.
Hey, Jane, let's get out of here. I'd like to talk to you.
Okay, Bill. I'm finished anyway.
Well, this is more like it.
I'll probably hear about this at school tomorrow.
Why?
I saw my principal over in the bird section as we went out. She gave me a very severe look.
Bird section? What was she doing in the bird section?
She's an authority on birds.
She is.
Mm-hmm. She can even imitate all the calls. At some of our school programs, Miss Brotherton is a star entertainer. The children love it.
You wouldn't think it to look at her.
I know. Oh, I really shouldn't laugh. She's awfully nice, and it's just about the only interest she has in life, poor thing. She's an old maid.
Oh. Well, maybe she's lucky.
I don't think she'd agree, Bill. No. Even though being in love is a lot of grief, somehow I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I guess it is. I'm just feeling sort of down in the mouth at the present moment.
Well, I understand, Bill. I've heard that things have been pretty rugged for you lately.
Oh, I'll live, I guess. After all, I'm not the only person in the world who has troubles. Look at Nicholas Dorn.
Nicholas? I don't know what he's got to complain about.
Well, it must have been pretty tough for him, postponing the marriage. You know, I thought it was awful decent of him to tell me.
Wait a minute, Bill.
What?
Did you say Nicholas had postponed his marriage to Peggy?
But didn't Peggy tell you?
Why, no. That is, I haven't seen Peggy for several days, but
Well, I saw Nicholas a couple of days ago, and he told me he decided that it would be better if he and Peggy put it off indefinitely. He didn't have to tell me. I thought it was pretty white of him.
Yes, it was. But I can't believe it. Oh, Peggy seems so determined, and maybe I've misjudged Nicholas after all.
He's a swell guy as far as I can see.
Yes, I guess he is. I might as well admit it, Bill. I tried to discourage Peggy about that marriage from the beginning. I just didn't feel it was right.
Well, it's kind of hard for me to talk about it.
Oh, I know it is, Bill. Well, maybe I shouldn't say this, the way your life is sort of mixed up at present. But to tell the truth, I've never been able to get it out of my head that you and Peggy, well, that you sort of belong together.
Oh, that's nice of you, Jane. I appreciate your pulling for me, even though I guess I have no right.
Well, Bill, I just want to tell you this. I think it's about the best news I've heard in a long time, that Peggy's not going to marry Nicholas after all. Oh, Bill, I'm so pleased about it. Aren't you?
But as Jane turned excitedly toward Bill, she was surprised to see a somewhat bitter expression on his face. Yes, Bill was thinking, it was good news, but what could it mean to him, actually? He thought of Ben Calvert's proposition, of the opportunity that he had to regain his freedom. Now that Peggy was free, his own freedom could have meant so much. But then Bill thought of his child, thought how difficult the choice was which confronted him. The choice to be made between his baby son and the young girl he had always loved. Now for our story. Jessie Calvert stood in the hallway, staring resentfully at the closed door of her husband's study, from which she could hear the murmur of low voices. This symbolized her position in this family, Jessie thought. This closed door, this exclusion. She was an outsider, not to be included in important family discussions, not to be considered or consulted. Ben Calvert and his daughter Kit on one side, secure in their arrogance and their wealth, and Jessie, alone, on the other. Well, Jessie thought, we'll see. We'll see who wins out in the end. There are a few things I know which won't help Kit's cause at all. And when the time comes, they may come in very handy. Maybe Kit will find out she can't always just get what she wants. Comforted somewhat by these thoughts, Jessie went on up the stairs. On the other side of the door, in the study, Ben Calvert stood in front of the fireplace, looking into the flames, while Kit roamed nervously about the room. They were waiting for Bill Meade, Kit's husband, who was to bring his answer today to Ben's proposition. Would Bill give up custody of the baby in exchange for a quiet divorce, uncontested by Kit?
Oh, why doesn't he come? He's 15 minutes late.
Get hold of yourself, Kit. He'll come. Don't be so impatient.
It was easy for you to be patient, Dad. You're not the one who's had to take the brunt of this mess. Had to...
Maybe you think I'm enjoying this. Having to lower myself to that idiot's level. Offer him his choice, if you please, when I'd like to give him a good beating. That's what he needs. Put some sense in him.
Now, wait, Dad. Maybe you'd better get hold of yourself. Now, please don't fly into one of your rages when Bill comes and antagonize him.
Antagonize him? That's good.
Now, Dad, it won't do any good to get angry. You know how Bill reacts when you get on your high horse. It just makes him all the more stubborn. Remember, Bill has the upper hand right now.
Bill has the upper hand? How can you say that?
Well, don't forget that it'll be very much to our advantage to keep this case out of court.
It will save us embarrassment, yes. We won't have to be exposed to public criticism.
No, Dad. It's much more serious than that. Things might come up. Bits of evidence that...
Evidence? What kind of evidence?
Well, I don't know. A lawyer might dig up all sorts of things.
There's nothing to dig up. Or is there? Have you done anything that I don't know about?
No, of course not, Dad. How could I have done anything that you don't know about?
Well, no man knows everything his daughter does. For instance, all that time you were out in California.
California? Well, what makes you say that? Has Jessie been... I mean...
Jessie? What about Jessie?
Well, she's... Oh, you know how she is. So suspicious of everything. I just thought perhaps she'd said something.
Jessie said lots of things. She's always talking. Making vague hints, but I never pay any attention to them.
Yes, I know. Of course, she doesn't know anything really, but... Oh, I guess I'm just getting jumpy.
I'm worried about you, Kit. You've been so strange lately. You seem to have lost your grip somehow.
Well, if I have, it isn't all I've lost. So far as I can see, I've lost just about everything.
Oh, nonsense. Buck up, Kit. We've nothing to worry about.
I only wish you were right.
I am, you'll see. Why, Bill wouldn't stand a ghost of a chance if he refused to play ball with us, tried to take the case into court. No sensible judge in the world would award him the custody of a baby that age.
What makes you so sure?
What stands to reason? In a way, I'd like to see him try and take it into court. And serve him right. If you hadn't been so determined about not wanting the thing to go through the courts, I'd have enjoyed it. We would have given him a beating he'd never forget.
Well, Dad, aren't you rather jumping the gun? He hasn't given us his answer yet.
Well, I know what it's going to be. You mark my word.
Oh, dear, there he is. Now, Dad, promise you won't get excited or say anything rash.
Don't worry about me. You just see to it that you don't forget who you are. You're a culprit. Now, get a good grip on yourself. Everything's going to be all right.
I'll let him in. Hello, Bill.
Hello, Kit.
Come in.
Thanks. Sorry I'm a little late. Got tied up at the bank at the last minute.
Oh, that's all right, Bill. We're here in the study.
Hello, Mr. Calvert.
Sit down, Bill.
Over here, Bill. You always like this chair.
Thanks.
Have a drink? Bourbon? Sherry?
Yes, Bill. I'm going to have one.
No, thanks.
All right. Bourbon, please, Dad.
Here you are, Kit.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, Bill, we might as well get right down to cases.
Might as well.
I imagine you've given my suggestion some thought. Decided what you're going to do.
Yes, I have, Mr. Calvert.
Kit will get her divorce somewhere out of town. All you have to do is agree not to make any fuss about the baby. Leave him entirely in our custody. That's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, Mr. Calvert, I'm afraid you've made the wrong assumption.
How so? It's perfectly obvious.
Not to me. No, you're all wrong. Both of you.
Wrong.
Yeah, very wrong. My answer to your proposition is no.
You mean to say you're fool enough to think you can fight a case like that out in court and win?
Well, I don't know about that. But I do know that I intend to do everything I can to get custody of my son.
You're a fool.
That's just one man's opinion. All I know is that I want that child, and I'm prepared to fight for him.
You're crazy.
Maybe I am.
Bill,
But
Bill, are you sure this is what you want to do? Have you thought it over from every angle?
I think I have, Kit.
Do you realize what you're up against, Bill?
I think I do.
But why? Why attempt something you're almost certain to lose?
Because it's something I have to do. That baby's my son.
He's mine, too, Bill.
Yeah, I know that. But you told me yourself you wished you'd never had him. Now, what sort of a father would I be after that if I didn't want him? Didn't want to give him the break he ought to have?
Oh, Bill, that's not fair. You're surely not going to capitalize on something I said in a moment of anger.
But I think you meant it. I think it was an honest impulse for you, a statement of your real feelings. That's why
I've had enough of this nonsense. What's the matter with you, Kit? Standing around trying to argue the thing out on a rational basis, lowering yourself to practically plead with this lunatic.
But, Dad...
Let him go ahead. See how far it gets him. He can't win, I tell you. You're just wasting your time and mine, too.
Oh, Dad, stop shouting.
I'm not shouting. I'm just sick and tired of seeing you make a fool of yourself. You don't have to ask for favors. If Bill wants to fight this thing out, all the better.
It's not that I want to fight. I've said from the beginning I'd much rather have Kit get the divorce in a decent, quiet way. I don't want a lot of trouble any more than you do.
Well, if that's the case, you're certainly going about it in the wrong way.
You think I'm going about it in the wrong way just because I don't want to give in to you. You came around with this fine proposition. I have my choice of my freedom or my child. Well, I don't consider that a reasonable offer. I want my freedom and my child.
Sure. The moon on the silver platter, too. That's the trouble with you. You don't know when you're well off. And even supposing you won, which isn't possible, how would you propose to take care of a child that age? It's the most ridiculous idea I ever heard of.
Now, don't worry about that. Frankly, I think I'd do a better job than you would.
Oh, you do?
Yes. That's one of the reasons I'm so determined to have custody of him. I hate to think of what would happen to him if he stayed here.
All right, Bill. You've been given your choice. And you've given your answer. Now I'm going to tell you something. You take this thing into court, that's fine. We'll fight you every inch of the way.
No, Dad.
And if you think Kit's going to give you a divorce now after this, you're crazy.
Well, Mr. Calvert, that's just about what I expected from you and Kit. I'm not surprised.
I warn you. You're going to be in for a very few nasty surprises before we're through with you.
I expected that, too.
Bill...
No, Kit. He's had his chance. Let it go.
Okay, Mr. Calvert. I guess we've taken care of everything pretty thoroughly, so I'll leave now. Now that we all know where we stand. Kit, I'd like to see the baby.
Not on your life. Not now or any other time. No, Bill. You've cooked your goose this time. As for my grandson, you'll be lucky if you ever see him again.
Well, there was nothing Bill Meade could do. Not then. So he left. But in Kit's mind, the same weary question was repeating itself. Should she tell her father the truth? Tell Ben that the baby for whose custody he was prepared to fight was in reality not hers at all? She didn't dare. If Ben found out the truth, that the baby he believed to be his grandson was actually Lisa Fenner's child, then Kit would have no one to turn to. No one at all. Yes, Kit. Things are beginning to close in on you now.